Welcome to working with ZBrush, a package that we will use for modeling and sculpting and texturing. Mostly in our application, we're going to try to use it for small or detailed stuff, sculpting and texturing. We're not going to do models from scratch, at least with this sequence of videos. If you have never used ZBrush before, you're going to discover that it is a program that is not that intuitive. Things don't look the same way like many other programs. You don't have the same type of menus on top. There are some that can start the names being similar, but it's a bit hard to identify. ZBrush was originally a program for painting, and then eventually became a 3D program that allowed you to do painting on 3D models, and then it became a sculpting program that has a lot of power, very powerful for sculpting, and you can look it up. You'll find a lot of wonderful models sculpted with ZBrush. It's kind of the standard for sculpting today. Maximum strength is sculpting, and texturing not as strong in terms of coloring. Still has a lot of good potential things. So here I have the program open, and when you open it for the first time, it's empty. There is nothing on it, and as said, it's not that intuitive. It has a bunch of little different things here and there. So if you have, by any chance, something is showing on your screen, and you don't want that, or if you have an object that is there that you don't want to start working on that object, what we can do, we can say document, and then we're going to just say new document, and it's going to ask me if I want to save it. I'm going to say no. That way my object is completely clean, or my scene is completely clean. You will see that one of the first windows, or the main windows that you see loaded, is on the right hand side. It's called Tool, and just like many objects, the word tool is not exactly what it means in any other programs. Tool refers to an object, a 3D object most likely, and those 3D objects are used for, of course, modeling. The way it works is that it used to be, you know, ZBrush would use 3D objects as tools for you to paint. So that way you could create kind of like a painter using paintings using 3D tools. So if I go on tool, I get to see the basic tools. If I hold my mouse over those tools, I could pick on different ones. If I hold my mouse on any of them and then I choose that one, let's see, I can see that there are all sorts of tools that I can use for creating models. So if I grab a sphere and then I just click on my window and I drag, I create a sphere. So basically, those are tools for me to draw and bring into the space. Notice that I have the draw tool right there for me to basically start with a sphere. If I click on another object, I could then go and add supposedly that object to my scene. Let me just start by cleaning up my object again. I don't want to use those, I just wanted to show those as a possibility. So tools is an element of way of creating 3D model objects and saving them as tools for you to bring back in again. And normally, the way to start is by just doing a little bit of playing with the software so we can get to use some tools and get more familiar with it. And one of the ways of doing it is the best by using the lightbox. The lightbox is a window that provides all sorts of material, all sorts of objects that you could use for working and getting familiar. You see there are projects, there are tools, which are 3D objects. You can see my tools right there. You have brushes, textures, alphas, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but they will be all useful for the process we're gonna do. In this case, you can have a project or a tool loaded if you wanted to play with that. Let me click on a project. And what is the difference of a project and a tool? A project is a file, a type of file, .zpr, that allows you to have a model with its content in it. With a lot of content, multiple things could happen and be on a project that contains all of the different parts that could be different objects. A tool is just simply one model that you could probably use and bring on to reuse in a different project. So it's a little bit different. If you get confused about them, I feel safer working with projects. I'm not an expert at ZBrush. I've used it and I used it in the past for many, many years, but I stopped using it for a good 10 years. So it's very different from what I remember it. And I need to get myself into recording and remembering it. So when I click on a project here, and I can go and find any of those objects. When I go and click on the dog, so that I can just go and double click on it, and by double clicking on it, the dog pops up. My object is ready to be used. If you use your mouse, you can rotate around it, and it's ready for me to start sculpting on it. I'm not going to sculpt just yet. um, Before I do that, I want to bring to your attention that there are this two little icons. They call them widgets that allow you to see how your object is. What direction they're looking, to the side or to the front. So that helps you a little bit understanding where your object is looking. So an object like this dog is not that easy to get confused, but sometimes you need to know which way Y is pointing up, and where is your X and where is your Z. On the left hand side, I see only kind of a silhouette of what my scene is, my sculpture, and actually that's kind of nice because you get to see the shape of your model as you're sculpting it. So that's pretty standard. You see my model, it's kind of faceted, it's not a big heavy model. Additionally to me being able to rotate around the object, I'm just simply using my mouse now and I'm clicking on the side. If I use my Wacom tablet, I will do the same thing, but just by clicking on the side, I could go and move around my camera around my object. I'm moving my camera. Notice how the ground plane is moving. I am not moving my object. I'm just moving my camera. Now, if if I want to move or get closer to the object, you see these icons here. So I have the option for just doing the same thing by holding the button and then moving, or you can zoom in or zoom out on your object, or you can use the move tool to bring your object to where you want to be. It's a bit uncomfortable to use it that way, but you get used to it. So the way to get there, you can when you get to a certain position, you can actually lock your camera, so you cannot move it by accident anymore. So if you want to stay on that position without moving it, you can have it right there. There is the option for showing the grid on the floor or not, or the option for removing perspective if you want to keep it more orthographic looking. Um, these little buttons are more like for zooming in, actually the working view area, not that big of a deal. This is the actual size of the thing, and this is kind of the half size of the thing. Not a lot of big things behind that. Um, so I'm gonna kind of give you a brief of everything. So I have my camera right there, ready to be moving. I have it now available for rotation X, Y, Z. I can have it available only for rotation in Y, or only for rotation in Z if I wanted to do that only. Alright, so let's do a little bit of sculpting right now, so we get a bit more familiar with the tool. So right now, in order for me to work on sculpting an object, this button has to be on the edit object letter T. It has to be turned on. If it is not turned on, that means you're going to be using just for drawing and painting or bringing new tools into your scene. I'm not going to do that. Edit is turned on right now. When edit is turned on, I can then start using some of the tools here on the side. So the very first one is the brushes window. There are several, very extensive, number of brushes. Very overwhelming. They're kind of divided by alphabetically. If you want to kind of find them from through the list, if you start remembering their names or their, and you can actually call them by clicking on the object or by pressing the B key, and then let's say for example I want to use the blob, so I can press another B, so the B are limited. That way I can have a little bit better chance to call it. So I'm say for example B, and then I say C for chisel. So I'm gonna click some of the chisel tools, and I can try to work with one of them. So it's a matter of just getting familiar with their names. I'm not that familiar yet, so it takes a little bit harder time. So I'm gonna use brushes. I'm gonna go back to the standard. So I'm not gonna change it much. Below here, I have the way the brush works, either by creating little dots. So when you're brushing, the dots are going to be doing that way, or you're going to start dragging, or freehanding, or spraying on the object. So let me try moving him around here. I'm gonna try to play with the standard, and then do some of that. I'll explain alpha and textures in a little bit. But before I modify my guy, you need to know a few other things. On the upper menu, you can see a number of options. Of course, this one for moving and scaling and rotating my object. So I'm not going to do that right now. I don't want to modify the object from its standard position. The gizmo, which allows me to do that 3D movement if I wanted to move, rotate, or do anything. This one is a Sculptress, which is another smaller version of the program that people use sometimes. And here, a way for us to use alphas, which alpha is a way for me to be able to sculpt. This is mRGB, which is modeling, and red, green, and blue, which is painting and modeling at the same time. This is RGB just for painting color. This is just for modeling only. If I want to do just simply material. This is not modeling material. So I wanted to do kind of like a metal or clay or whatever. The Z add is to add, and Z sub is to subtract. Below here, I see the density of my tool, the focal shift, which is how big I want that influence of the center of my tool, and then the draw size is how big the whole thing is in general. So let me bring it down like this. I'm gonna do it like that, and I see that I have a standard, I have dots. I'm gonna do a little bit of pulling out my model. Right now my intensity is 25, so it's fairly high, and I will be able to go and push some things around. If I need to move, I move this guy here and try to do some of it right there. So you would go around and do a little bit of tweaking on your, let's say, raw model. Right now it's a very raw model, so I'm not going to do much with that right now. Now I'm using stroke on dots. I could go here and use drag only, and then the drag, I just simply allow the object to be dragged, and then just use the tool, or better, the brush, to grow on that space, and a little bit more like a dragging as I'm there growing the space. The other one would be freehand, which is similar to the first one, only that it's a bit more focused, a bit stronger. And the other one is spray, which is kind of taking all of this basic brush and just move it back, and you start brushing. I don't have enough information here. Let me just change the size a little bit. I'm gonna start seeing how my object kind of gets kind of blobby looking, because it's kind of show, launching little dots like that on the object. Let me undo that because that's not what I want. The other option is dragging the dot which is pretty much letting that, you see how the dot for me to sculpt, I kind of find the spot for it to work the best way I want it, and then when I let go, it stays there. So you decide which one you want to work with to modify your object. I'm going to zoom out here a little bit, and there are a couple things more that I want to show you with my interface here. One of them is the framing. It will go back to the center of my object, which is convenient. The other option here I have to make this a bit faster and easier. If I press my space bar, this submenu appears, and that makes things a little bit easier because I get to see my draw size right there. I can get to see my focal shift and my intensity and what are the things that are being affected, and if I'm drawing or editing, right? Or if I'm scrolling, rotating, moving, or even zooming in and zooming out. So it becomes a bit easier because I get to, I'm sorry, scroll is moving the whole thing. I don't want that. I want move my object and then just zoom in and then move a little bit more. Then I can go and shift a little bit different, bring down my object so I can start really doing a little bit of sculpture on the guy. The last thing I'm going to show you in this segment is a way for me to work symmetry. Right now I've been just doing variations of the object in one side, and I think it makes more sense for me to go and work on it by modifying it. And for that I can go under geometry, and I have here is not geometry, is transform. And then I can see here under my if I turn on my X key, activate symmetry. I activate my symmetry on X, or I can do it in Y, or I can do it in Z. I wouldn't do the three at a time. I'm gonna keep it on X. Just pressing X on my keyboard turns it on and off, and it's on the transform, not on the geometry. And then I'm gonna just start doing it. You can see my little dot there changing. So now you can see how my object, start receiving the symmetry. And then of course I zoom out, and I can start kind of doing a little bit of very basic sculpting on my object. If you look around, you can see it on the other side. All right, I'm gonna stop it there for now, and let's move on to the next video.